I suppose this year has been nothing like what we expected it would be at all. When we came to the beginning of 2020, we knew we'd be meeting as a new team. We hadn't all come together at that point, but very different. What have been some of the highlights for you? Hayley, perhaps you could kick us off. What have been some of the highlights?
Yeah, well, Mark, I think this is just such a weird year, isn't it? Kind of moving to a new country and then being in lockdown. And there have been some real highs, though. I think for me, the high came quite recently at our AGM. And I was on Zoom kind of manning the participants and just seeing people flood in and thinking, oh crikey, if we get to over 100, this is going to cause a problem. Zoom might kick us out. But just that, actually people wanting to feed in, people wanting to hear and share what God is doing. I think for me that was a real highlight to see a huge sweep of our churches and family engaging in that way.
Yeah, it was a fantastic evening, wasn't it? Yeah.
Really good evening.
Emma, what about you?
It's a really tricky one actually, because there've been quite a few highlights. For me in particular, the whole, I was in the role back in September of last year, and everybody just kept leaving. Susan finished after I started, then Tim left, and and so the formation of a new team was just a real highlight. And I think right at the very beginning, we had a day where we started to do some vision planning and some strategy planning, and we went away, just the three of us. And that for me was a real highlight, because it felt as if you were starting to go in a new direction rather than treading water. Mm-hmm. So that was a real highlight. But I'd also say that, like Hayley, a recent highlight has been the fact that as CYF workers, we started to build a network. Some really strong relationships have started to be built. So it was fab to get emails from somebody saying, thinking of doing this, is there anything that's going on within the association that we could tie in with? And that for me was a real highlight. Just going, okay, this is the direction I was really hoping it would go in. Not sure that it would get there, but it looks like the seeds are already showing to say that, yeah, we've got something now for CYF workers to say, yeah, there's something we can definitely plug into, which is brilliant.
Yeah, sounds absolutely fantastic. Yeah, I was thinking about it as well. I think for me, one of the highlights also has been that, seeing how churches have adapted so well to to use one of the words of the year, unprecedented changes that there have been. I never think that Baptist churches are built for speed in change, built for thoroughness, but not speed. But actually, people have had to adapt so quickly, and we probably made 10 years progress in about 2 months in many churches, and the creativity that we've seen in the churches as people have moved services online. But it's not just about services, it's about the pastoral care that has been done as well, and then the mission stories where people have creatively engaged in mission, from some very simple unexpected ideas through to those that have been a bit more planned. And I think, Emma, I love the story that you shared, and perhaps you could just tell it again to us now about Easter and the Easter eggs that you were given.
Oh, well, that was a great story from sort of a local perspective, being a local minister in pastorate. And as lockdown fully kicked in, lots of supermarkets realised that all the Easter eggs that they'd been sent to sell just weren't going to be sold. And so our local Aldi's, they gifted us 300 Easter eggs. I think it was more than that. It was basically every time you turn up to get their donations for the local food bank, we'll give you a 50 odd Easter eggs. And so, we ended up with all these Easter eggs, and all we did, we didn't feel that we could be strategic enough at that point because of the restrictions of lockdown to say do our toddler group we just wanted to bless the community. So those of us within walking distance of the church, we would pick up, a couple of bags full of Easter eggs. We had our streets that we would go to, and we just looked for the rainbows that people had put in their windows to indicate that children were there. And so if there were 3 rainbows, they got 3 Easter eggs, because we assumed 3 rainbows meant 3 children. And the response that we got was just fantastic. People saying, how did you know we had 3 children? And go, well, we didn't really, and having to say, we didn't really, but we made an educated guess. But one lady, bless her, she'd put a rainbow in her window, and she got in touch with the church, and she said, I haven't had an Easter egg in over 50 years, and you don't know what this means. And so just stories like that, we were really blessed because of the generosity of Aldi's, but we were really blessed just by how such a small gift, seemingly insignificant, could make such a huge difference. And yeah, it was that was from a ministerial point of view, that was just fab.
Yeah, and I love those kind of stories where it's not that you went out initially to think, how can we bless people this Easter, but an opportunity came along and you could respond to it. And I love those kind of things. Mm-hmm. Hayley, I know you've been doing a lot of work around mission as a mission enabler for the association. Are there any stories of mission that you've come across over the last year that you think, oh, that's really encouraging?
Yeah, there's loads, and I think a big shout out to all our churches that are just doing the traditional missional stuff, checking in on their neighbours, building up relationships. All of that is really cool, and I think one of the dangers as ministers we have is we get so program led, so focused on those in the building, and this has been a real push for us. Obviously, the highlight, and if you go on our website, you can check out the story of the kind of church that set up a Facebook page of kind of Try Jesus 365, and every day pointing a reason to follow Jesus, and people have come to faith. And it's really simple way of using social media just to encourage people, and that's just included Wales, and it's gone further afield as well, as people have kind of plugged in to that. We've seen people being really creative in their kind of windowscaping, in labyrinths. There's a church in the valleys that has got a lovely garden around their church. So they created it into a kind of prayer sanctuary and prayer garden. And just as people went on their kind of hourly walk very early on in lockdown, they had that opportunity to encounter God in that way. There's another church, one of our home mission churches, since lockdown, since they've kind of opened up after lockdown, have seen people just walk in off the street and kind of say, we've been watching you from afar on social media, and now we feel it's time. We want to join in. And that's just incredibly exciting, because for years, churches have faithfully been kind of ploughing those seeds, and now they're seeing the fruition, and that's really great. And of course, at Christmas time, many of our churches are participating in the big kind of carol sing, where they're inviting their churches out in their streets just to sing a few carols at a set amount of time. And yeah, it's really exciting to see those churches just engage in new ways, and all outside of the building, which is great.
Yeah, so Zoom has been absolutely fantastic with being able to connect with things, and so much that people have done, and it isn't just online. Emma, you've got some examples, I think, of things that aren't online as well.
Yeah, I've been really impressed by how people have been so creative. They've used Zoom and everything else, but one of the things that's been a real blessing, and it's really blessed my heart, is the fact that we've come to a realization, and I don't know whether this is only the few gatherings that I've spoken to, of people who have been housebound for years and years and years. So not just lockdown. And suddenly, because everybody was in lockdown, people started printing off for those who weren't online or weren't able to connect with Zoom or didn't have internet access. And so printed copies were going through people's doors. And suddenly there were some of our congregation members who hadn't been able to connect with church in a physical way for a long time. Suddenly they were back part of church and getting the newsletters and getting the news magazines and getting the church services. And I really want to take my hat off to churches who they've acknowledged, okay, people in their congregations, they're not online, but there are other ways. And so, when the letters drop through the door and you've heard it, and that's again another connection. I just think that we really, personally, I'm so grateful for those churches who have gone that extra step and not just said, well, we'll engage with those who are online, but they've really engaged with the whole of the community and the church community and said, what can we do? How can we engage? And because that's a lot of street walking, it's a lot of postage, there's an added dimension to all of that. And I think churches that have done that, they really need to be commended for having done that.
And this is part of the changing thinking that we're having to do, isn't it? Because when our buildings are open, so much of it is about, oh, come to us. But suddenly, with the buildings closed, it's about the church leaving the building and going out in these different ways, which is something we've really got to keep, I think, as we look to the future. And doing different things is really important with that as well. And as an association, we've tried to do that. And Hayley, perhaps you could talk a little bit about Renew Wellbeing and Naomi.
Yeah, of course. So at the start of the year, with the kind of commission I had to enable mission, I was really inspired by the Renew Wellbeing kind of movement, in the sense of creating spaces where it's okay not to be okay, and bringing that Celtic rhythm of prayer and evangelism into that. We set aside a new role, and Naomi Dickinson, who's also one of the ministers at Ararat Baptist Church, was called into that role. And so she's been working, even in lockdown, about creating spaces where it's okay not to be okay, and helping churches, coming alongside churches to host spaces online and physically where they can just be. And in the being, we can show Jesus. And so that was a real highlight again for this year, that stuff didn't stop, but as an association, we kept going. And obviously it is a real aspiration for the coming years as we roll this out across South Wales.
Yeah, I think you've shared some fantastic stories there. And I think one of my reflections in coming into regional ministry is one of the most exciting and uplifting things is to hear these stories and see the way churches are engaging and doing things, and what a privilege it is to be able to hear some of those stories and indeed to journey with people and churches along the way in these things. Absolutely fantastic. Let's just change for a moment, and some people might be quite glad that 2020 is drawing to an end, because it has been such a challenging year. 2021 is coming upon us fairly soon. Let me just ask you, what hopes do you have for 2021? Emma, let's come to you first. What sort of hopes?
Well, I'm really hoping that we're going to build on the momentum that has already been created during 2020, in the fact that because things have gone more online, we are far more connected to some extent in a way that, being able to engage with some of our youth workers that are right down in the west of Wales, that geographically makes it tricky to do that. We've become so familiar with stuff like Zoom and Teams that actually now doing a meeting and catching up and really forging a relationship, yes, it'll be lovely in 2021 if we can actually get together at some point to have a coffee, to explore stuff, to do some training together. But my hope is that because we've been forced into this place during 2020, we'll build on that and use all the good stuff that's come out of that to really build a solid, strong network that we can learn from each other, grow together, encourage each other, bless each other. And so some of the training that we've got planned for 2021, some of the podcasts that we've got where we're looking to really engage in a really wide spectrum across all the areas of youth ministry, children's ministry, families ministry. We've got some great speakers lined up to do podcasts, really hoping that that would have a wider net in 2021 than maybe we would have had we have done this this year or the year before, because we've already opened up bigger networks, if that makes sense.
Yeah, fantastic, exciting things. Hayley, what about you?
Yeah, so again, I think that word momentum that Emma shared is so key, and I would like to think that we keep doing that. We keep going, and I know we love our buildings. I know we love gathering together in that corporate way, but from a missional point of view, I want to encourage you not to rush back into your buildings, but to keep that missional focus outside. I think in 2021, my hope is that we will kind of keep running and go with that. We have, as Emma said, we've now gone online, which for some of our churches, for some of us, it took us a long time to get online, and we maybe wouldn't have done it. But what we've done is we've opened up a portal to a missing generation in church life. And I don't want us to shut that portal down just because 2020 is over. But in 2021, learn to use this portal as a way of communicating the gospel and creating disciples, not just inviting people into a building. I'd like to hope and pray so much that all the missional stuff people did at Easter, like the Easter eggs that Emma shared, like the Give Jesus a Go kind of stuff, the prayer sanctuaries outside, I don't want those to stop. I want those to continue. I think we can embed now the lessons that we've learned this year into our normal lives. I was chatting to a church the other day, and they're doing the carol service out on the street, and I said, you want to do this every year now? Don't then force the carol service back in the building. Let's keep it out where the community are. And so, yeah, that's my hope, that we would learn to integrate some of those lessons into what we've known and loved for many years.
Yeah. I think that's one of the really interesting. I think that's one of the really interesting things, though, isn't it? Because it's just like we have spent so much time thinking, how do we communicate to those who come into the building who already know Jesus potentially? And this year we spent so much time thinking, how do we communicate what we believe so that we're not a closed building? There was all that stuff, wasn't there, at the beginning of 2022 of, the church is closed. And the churches came back with, no, the church is very much open. The church is very much alive. And how do we communicate that to a community that sees a closed building? And so the stuff like the window displays and everything else that try to share the message and everything else. And I think going into 2021, we need to keep that as our focus, which is probably repeating exactly what Hayley's just said, but I just feel it's so important that we keep that momentum going of how do we communicate our faith beyond a spoken word in a building with doors that open and close for people to come in and out.
Emma, I think that's really key. And for me, when people say, oh, the church is closed, I'm like, no, it's just empty. And I like using that phrase empty because it reminds us of the empty tomb. Jesus didn't stay in that tomb and just go, oh, I've risen now. He went out and he shared that. And I think we need to keep that imagery in our minds of empty churches are like the empty tomb. The Spirit of God is just out in the streets now and shouldn't be contained in a building.
Yeah, it's a key message, isn't it? And one that we were encouraged to think about at the AGM, as Lynn Green brought the message to us with part of it saying, let my people go, a prophetic word from there, and saying that actually we might need to let go of some of our traditions sometimes. And it seems to me like we have this unique opportunity in church life in that I know in churches that I've been part of, it's easier to start something than it is to stop something. And yet we're almost gifted with this opportunity right now to say, look, everything that we normally did had to stop. We've not been able to do it in the same way. So let's think imaginatively, what should start again and why are we starting it? And I think asking that question, why are we doing it, is such a key one. Who are we seeking to bless through what we're doing in this? Is it for people in the church who are already Christians? And that's great to do those things. It's really important. But also we have to keep that focus on, are we blessing people outside of the church as well, that they might hear something of that gospel message? So I think the three of us share that hope. And I think, Emma, coming back to one of the things that you said earlier on, I agree. Zoom has been, many of us have heard that term zoomed out now because we've had too much Zoom, but it is a real blessing for us in that we can meet up with people and do things that we might not otherwise have been a part of. But I think I also combine that with the hope that I would love to, some of the people that I've connected with on Zoom, met online, I would love to meet face to face. And so part of my hope for 2021 is just being able to get out and meet people and visit churches and see people in their situations. And I really do believe that just as I've really been blessed this year by the stories I've heard and through meeting people online, the blessings will be much greater through meeting in person with people as well. Well, I think that's been great. Thank you so much for joining us for this conversation. We want to say, on behalf of everyone at South Wales Baptist Association, a huge, huge thank you to you for partnering with us in the gospel. That's what we talked about at the AGM, the theme of the AGM, partnering with the gospel. Together as a Baptist family across South Wales, we are partnering with one another. And that is a real joy and a blessing for us as a regional team, but I really hope for you as a church and as ministers as well. So our prayer for you in 2020 and what remains of it is that you will have a fantastic Christmas, even if it's very different from the normal one that you would experience, but also that 2021 will be an amazing year as well. We pray God's blessing on you all. Thank you very much for watching.